Welcome back to the Band Guide. I'm your band guy, Colin, and today I want to talk to you about delay. Delay is one of the most used tools in the mixing process, but it's kind of misunderstood and often misused, and there's really a lot of mistakes that we all make with delay, but today I want to go through 5 mistakes that we all make with delay and how you can avoid them. These are mistakes I've made, I've seen my students make, so I know that they're mistakes that are out there, and by avoiding these mistakes, you can use delay better and ultimately end up with a better mix that sounds more professional, hopefully, and that's the goal, right? Okay, before we get into it though, I just want to give you something to help you with the mixing process in general. Delay is an important tool, but it's a tool that I don't introduce into my mix until later in the process because it can kind of cloud and muddy things up if you're not aware of how it's impacting the mix. So I like to introduce it in my 5th step of my 6-step mixing process, and I put together a 6-step checklist that just walks through the 6-step mixing process, and it's the same 6 steps that all professional mixes have, and it gives you a system that you can follow to get more consistently better mixes. It's completely free from the link in the description below. It's really going to help you out. It's my 6-step checklist to a pro mix, so be sure to pick it up. But let's go and get into 5 mistakes with delay that we all make. Starting with number 1, only using timed delays. So these would be delays that are perfectly in time with your song, either a quarter note or an 8th note. It doesn't matter as long as it's perfectly in time with the song. And I used to only ever use perfectly timed delays. I felt like everything in music had to be perfectly timed together, right? This is missing a huge opportunity. I think in particular, slapback delays are one of the coolest delays that you can use, and they're typically not actually perfectly timed with the song. So play around with delays that aren't perfectly timed to your song. Maybe even play around with slightly having your delays off, even if they are meant to be perfectly timed with your song. So you could have a quarter note where the left here is just a little bit off from the right ear, but don't worry about it always being perfectly timed in with the song. That can really help you out and avoid just kind of having boring delays that sound like really boring digital delays. Okay, mistake number 2, not automating our delays, just letting our delays sit around at the same exact volume the entire mix. Very rarely do you want your delays to just always be up the exact same level. In a chorus that's louder, for example, you might want to bring your delays up so you can hear or feel them a little bit better. But then in the verse, when things are stripped back, you might want to bring them down or maybe cut them out altogether. So I automate my delays, either how much I'm sending off to a delay or how loud the level of that delay is in the song. It doesn't really matter how you do it, whatever makes sense to you. But don't just have your delays at one volume the entire song. It's kind of like reverb where less is more a lot of the time, but sometimes all of a sudden more is more, and you might want it to be really obvious. So I will have my delays writing where I will bring them up on one word or one phrase and let it really ring out and then really come back down at other points. Or I might have the repeats really repeat a whole bunch in one section, or I'm just automating the volume and having just the volume come up and down in different sections. So mistake number 2 is not automating your delays, and that's actually really similar and kind of connected but different to mistake number 3, which is not using delay throws. So delay throws are where you just have a word or a phrase that gets delay, and you can be really specific with how that delay sounds, what exact word or phrase get delayed, and you can get very into the minutia of it and make it really something perfect for that word or phrase. So this would be either taking out a section, so just taking a word and moving it to a new track and creating that as your delay track, and then getting really specific with it, or it could be automating your send to only send on specific words. You could do this with automation, but I typically actually just create a whole new track and only copy down the words or snare hits or whatever it is that I want to delay and have it be a separate track that I'm processing differently. And because it's only going to be on this certain phrase or these certain phrases or this certain thing that's happening momentarily, I can get really specific with how I want that delay to sound for that very specific purpose. I think it'd be really cool. They're kind of like ear candy, and they're a great production trick to just add a little bit more flavor to your mix. And in some ways, that is also connected to mistake number 4, which is not processing your delays. So as I said, with delay throws, you can get really specific in how you're making them sound, but you can also get really specific with how you're making your general delays sound. And a lot of people just slap a stereo delay or a mono delay on a track, and they won't think too much about, could I make this sound cooler or more interesting or fit in the mix a little bit better? So the biggest things that you could do are try adding reverb after your delays, try adding distortion after your delays, try adding chorus or a phase or some sort of modulation after your delays. All of those I've used, and they can create really interesting effects with your delays. You can also use compression after delays, especially if you're working in Logic or something where you can sidechain so that when the vocal is rapping or singing or whatever, it gets turned down, and then when that phrase ends, it automatically lets more signal or volume come back out. So you can get really crazy in your processing of your delays and make them much more interesting and tailored to your song. And 5, this is a real biggie for me, only using delays as an effect, not using it to create space. So an effect is like what we just talked about, getting really crazy with flangers and phasers and really making it something obvious. But you can also just use delays to create space. And that's actually probably the first way that I typically use a delay, is just a stereo slapback delay. So a super short delay that's really, really kind of tucked in the mix around the vocal. And it gives the vocal a little bit more presence and body in the mix while giving it a sense of space in the mix as well. If you think about it, one way that you hear in your room, the sound of your room, is when I shout, I hear it bounce off the walls and back into my ears. And I don't necessarily hear that happening over and repeating and being a bunch of little repeats. And I also don't notice it as like a separate event where it's like I yell and then a second later I hear it again. You often can't really tell, but you kind of just feel like, oh, I'm here in my room when you do that. Try it right now. Go ahead and just shout in your room for a second. And do you notice that there's an obvious delay, or does it take a second? I've done a whole video just on this effect. I'll link to it above here. You can check out, because this easy pro vocal trick, this easy stereo delay, slapback stereo delay, is one of the best uses of delay. And it's something that we don't think about because we often think about delay as an effect and not as a way to create space. But it's a very powerful way to create space. So definitely check out that video. But before you do, be sure to grab the 6-step checklist to a pro mix. It's really going to help you out. It walks through the same 6 steps that all professional mixes have and how you can do them wherever it is that you're making music. And it's completely free. So be sure to grab it from the link in the description below. Before you go, I'd love to hear from you. Do you have any other mistakes that we need to be avoiding with delay? Let me know in the comments below. There's a lot that we can be making. Those are my top 5, but I'd love to hear if you have any others. Let me know in the comments. Also, let me know, have you been making any of these, and are you going to avoid them in the future? If this video was helpful, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you next week with another video. One